I'm 33F and my sister Emma is 26F. We've always had a complicated relationship because of the 7-year age gap, but I've tried to be a good big sister to her. Our parents are middle class, comfortable, but not wealthy, so when it came to college, we were both expected to figure out our own funding through scholarships, loans, and part-time jobs. I went the traditional route and got a business degree, then landed a job at a marketing firm right after graduation. I've been working there for 11 years now, and have worked my way up to senior manager. I live modestly, save aggressively, and have built up a pretty decent nest egg. My coworkers always joke that I'm the most responsible person they know, sometimes to a fault. Emma has always been different. She's incredibly creative and has this natural talent for cooking that's honestly amazing. Even as a kid, she could throw together random ingredients from our pantry and create something that tasted like it came from a fancy restaurant. She'd watch cooking shows obsessively and was always experimenting with new recipes. I remember when Emma was maybe 12, she made this elaborate dinner for our parents' anniversary using techniques she'd learned from watching Gordon Ramsay. She'd somehow figured out how to make a perfect risotto and had plated everything like a professional chef. Our parents were blown away, and that's when we all realized Emma had a real gift. After high school, Emma started community college, but dropped out after a year. She said traditional academics weren't for her, and that she wanted to pursue cooking professionally. Our parents were disappointed because they'd always emphasized the importance of education, but Emma got a job at a local restaurant and seemed happy learning hands-on. For the next few years, Emma worked at various restaurants around the city. She started as a prep cook at a casual dining place, then moved to a slightly upscale bistro as a line cook. She was passionate about it and would come home every day with stories about new techniques she'd learned or dishes she'd helped create. Emma would call me from work during her breaks, excited about some new sauce she'd perfected or a plating technique the head chef had taught her. She was like a sponge, absorbing everything she could about cooking. She'd even practice knife skills at home for hours, determined to get faster and more precise. I admired Emma's dedication to her craft. While I was climbing the corporate ladder through meetings and spreadsheets, she was developing actual artistic skills. There was something beautiful about watching her work in a kitchen. She had this natural rhythm and intuition that you can't teach. About 4 years ago, Emma came to me with a proposal that would change everything. She'd been accepted to the Culinary Institute of America, which is basically the Harvard of cooking schools. The acceptance letter had arrived on a Tuesday, and Emma called me immediately, crying with excitement. "I can't believe I got in," she said through tears. "Do you know how competitive this program is? They only accept like 15% of applicants." The program was 18 months long and would give her the credentials and connections she needed to eventually open her own restaurant. Emma had been dreaming about this opportunity for years, and she'd spent months preparing her application, gathering letters of recommendation from chefs she'd worked under, and perfecting her entrance portfolio. The problem was the cost. Tuition, room and board, and expenses would total about $85,000. Our parents couldn't afford that kind of money, and Emma's credit wasn't good enough to qualify for private student loans that large. She'd been working in restaurants for 4 years, but the pay was low and irregular, so she hadn't been able to save much. Emma had applied for every scholarship and grant she could find. She'd written dozens of essays about her passion for cooking and her career goals. She'd even worked extra shifts at the restaurant to pay for the application fees. But she'd only gotten about $5,000 in financial aid. She was devastated because this was her dream school, and she'd already been working in restaurants for 4 years to get the experience needed for admission. The CIA required applicants to have at least 6 months of professional kitchen experience, and Emma had far exceeded that requirement. "I don't know what I'm going to do," Emma said when she came over to my apartment to talk about the situation. "This is my one shot to get the kind of training that could change my entire career. But I can't come up with $80,000. I could see how heartbroken Emma was about potentially missing this opportunity. She'd worked so hard to get accepted, and I knew that culinary school could really set her up for a successful career. The CIA had connections to top restaurants all over the world, and their graduates often went on to become executive chefs and restaurant owners. I'd been saving money for a long time and had about $90,000 in various accounts. I was planning to use some of it for a house down payment eventually, but I wasn't in a rush to buy property. I was comfortable in my rental apartment, and the housing market was pretty expensive at the time anyway. After thinking about it for a few weeks, I decided to pay for Emma's culinary school. The decision wasn't easy. $85,000 was a significant chunk of my savings, representing years of careful budgeting and financial discipline. But Emma was my sister, and I believed in her talent. I called Emma and asked her to come over for dinner. When she arrived, I could tell she was still stressed about the money situation. She'd been applying for additional scholarships and even considering taking out high-interest private loans. "Emma," I said, "I want to pay for your culinary school." She stared at me for a moment, like she hadn't heard correctly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I want to cover the full cost as a gift, not a loan, because I believe in your talent and I want to see you succeed." Emma burst into tears and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. She kept saying thank you over and over, and I could feel how much this meant to her. "I'll pay you back," she said through her tears. "I promise, as soon as I'm successful, I'll pay back every penny." I told her not to worry about paying me back. I said the only thing I wanted in return was for her to work hard and follow her dreams. I meant it too. I wasn't thinking of this as a loan that needed to be repaid. I was thinking of it as an investment in Emma's future happiness and success. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Emma had to find housing near the CIA campus, buy professional kitchen equipment for her classes, and arrange to leave her current job. She was so excited that she could barely contain herself. Emma started at culinary school that fall, and for the first year, everything went perfectly. She was at the top of her class, her instructors loved her, and she was learning incredible techniques from world-class chefs. She'd call me every week to tell me about her classes and show me pictures of the dishes she was creating. "Today we learned how to make perfect hollandaise," she'd say, or "Chef Laurent taught us this amazing technique for filleting fish." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I loved hearing about everything she was learning. During her externship in the second year, Emma got placed at a high-end restaurant in New York City. It was an amazing opportunity, and she was working under a chef who had won James Beard Awards. She was learning advanced techniques and getting exposure to the kind of fine dining that she wanted to specialize in. The externship was grueling. Emma was working 14-hour days in a high-pressure kitchen, but she thrived under the intensity. She'd call me exhausted but exhilarated, talking about the complex dishes she was helping to prepare and the level of precision required. "Yesterday, I spent 6 hours just learning how to properly brunoise vegetables," she told me during one call. "My knife cuts have to be perfect, exactly 2 millimeters on each side. It's insane how detailed everything is, but I love it." Emma graduated from culinary school with honors and decided to stay in New York City to work in the restaurant scene there. She got hired as a sous chef at a well-regarded restaurant in Manhattan, which was an incredible achievement for someone just out of school. For about a year, Emma worked at various high-end restaurants in the city, building her resume and learning from established chefs. She was making decent money, not enough to live luxuriously in Manhattan, but enough to cover her expenses and even save a little bit. During this time, Emma was completely focused on her craft. She'd work long shifts, then go home and practice new techniques or experiment with recipe ideas. She was building relationships with suppliers, learning about sourcing ingredients, and developing her own culinary style. I was so proud of her dedication. When I'd visit her in New York, I could see how much she'd grown as both a chef and a person. She had this confidence in the kitchen that was really impressive to watch. Then Emma called me with exciting news. She'd met an investor who was interested in backing her in opening her own restaurant. She was only 25, which was young to be an executive chef and restaurant owner, but her investor believed in her vision. "His name is Richard," Emma explained during our phone call. "He owns several restaurants in the city, and he's been watching my career. He thinks I have the talent and vision to run my own place." I was thrilled for her. This was exactly what we'd hoped culinary school would lead to, Emma getting the opportunity to showcase her talents and build her own business. The timeline was faster than I'd expected, but Emma was clearly ready for the challenge. Emma's restaurant concept was sophisticated but accessible. She wanted to do modern American cuisine with a focus on locally sourced ingredients and creative presentations. The investor, Richard, was putting up $300,000 to get the restaurant off the ground, and Emma would be the executive chef and part owner. The months leading up to the restaurant opening were intense. Emma was involved in every aspect of the planning, designing the menu, hiring staff, working with architects on the kitchen layout, and developing relationships with local farmers and suppliers. She'd call me with updates about the progress, always excited but sometimes overwhelmed by the responsibility. "I'm designing a menu that will represent everything I've learned," she said. "It has to be perfect." The restaurant opened about 8 months later, and the early reviews were incredible. The New York Times food critic gave it 3 stars, praising Emma's innovative approach to comfort food and her technical precision combined with creative flair. Other food publications followed with equally positive reviews. New York Magazine called Emma a rising star in the culinary world, and Food and Wine featured her in an article about young chefs to watch. The restaurant was booked solid for weeks in advance, and there was already talk about Emma being nominated for a James Beard Award. She was featured in food magazines, won a few local awards, and was even invited to cook at some prestigious culinary events. I was so proud of her. It felt like my investment in her education had paid off in the best possible way. Emma had used the opportunities I'd helped provide to build something truly impressive. Update: 1 year later. For the first year, Emma's restaurant was a huge success. The accolades kept coming, and Emma was becoming a recognizable name in New York's competitive culinary scene. She was invited to cook at charity events, food festivals, and even appeared as a guest on a few cooking shows. But that's when I started noticing some changes in Emma's attitude and lifestyle. Her social media presence became much more focused on her celebrity status rather than her cooking. Instead of posting pictures of beautiful dishes or behind-the-scenes kitchen shots, she was posting constantly about fancy parties she attended, expensive clothes she bought, and trips she took to food festivals around the world. When I call Emma to congratulate her on some new achievement or article about her restaurant, our conversations became shorter and more superficial. She seemed less interested in talking about cooking techniques or menu development, and more focused on networking events and media appearances. "I'm going to the James Beard Foundation Gala next week," she'd say, or "I'm flying to Napa for a wine dinner with some celebrity chefs." While these opportunities were impressive, I noticed she talked less and less about the actual cooking. Emma's lifestyle was also getting noticeably more expensive. She moved from her modest apartment in Queens to a high-end place in Manhattan. The new apartment was beautiful, but cost 3 times what she'd been paying before. She bought a luxury car, a BMW that she definitely didn't need in a city with excellent public transportation. Her wardrobe changed too. Emma had always dressed practically for kitchen work, but now she was constantly posting pictures of herself in designer outfits at industry events. She'd gotten a complete makeover, professional styling, expensive haircuts, and what looked like a significant investment in high-end clothing. For someone who was supposedly reinvesting everything back into her business, she seemed to be spending a lot on personal luxuries. When I mentioned this during one of our calls, Emma got defensive. "I need to network and maintain my image," she said. "This industry is all about relationships and reputation. People need to see that I'm successful." "But are you still spending time in the kitchen?" I asked. "That's what made your restaurant successful in the first place." "Of course I am," Emma said, but something in her tone made me doubt that. "I've just hired some really talented people to help me manage the day-to-day operations." "What do you mean by that?" "I've brought in a head chef to handle most of the cooking so I can focus on the bigger picture, expanding the brand, maybe opening a second location, working on a cookbook deal." This concerned me. Emma's restaurant had become successful because of her personal involvement in the kitchen and her hands-on approach to every dish. The reviews had specifically praised her creativity and technical skill. If she was stepping back from the actual cooking, what would happen to the quality that had made the restaurant special? "Emma, don't you think it's important for you to stay involved in the kitchen? Your customers come there to experience your cooking. They come for the Emma Parker experience," she corrected me, using her full name in a way that sounded rehearsed. "That's bigger than just me standing over a stove." I was concerned that Emma was losing sight of what had made her special as a chef, but I didn't want to be overly critical. Maybe she really did know what she was doing business-wise. The restaurant was still successful, and Emma was clearly in demand in the industry. But over the next few months, I started hearing subtle changes in how people talked about Emma's restaurant. Food bloggers mentioned that the quality seemed inconsistent compared to the early days. A few reviews noted that dishes they'd loved on previous visits didn't taste quite the same. When I brought this up with Emma, she dismissed the criticism. "Food critics are impossible to please," she said. "They always want to tear down successful people. The restaurant is doing fine." But I could tell from her voice that she was more stressed than she was letting on. She was traveling constantly for various food events and media opportunities, which meant she was spending even less time at the restaurant. During one conversation, Emma mentioned that she'd been asked to be a judge on a cooking competition show. She was excited about the opportunity and the money it would pay, but it would require her to be away from the restaurant for several weeks of filming. "Don't you think you should focus on the restaurant first?" I asked. "You've only been open for a year." "This is a huge opportunity," Emma said. "Do you know how many chefs would kill for a chance like this? It's going to raise my profile nationally." I was starting to worry that Emma was more interested in being famous than in being a great chef, but I kept those concerns to myself. Update: 18 months later ***. My concerns about Emma's priorities proved to be justified. About 6 months ago, Emma called me with troubling news about her restaurant. Business had been declining over the past few months. Reviews were getting worse, customers were complaining about inconsistent food quality, and reservations were way down from the previous year. "I don't understand what's happening," Emma said, and she sounded genuinely confused. "We're doing everything the same way." When I asked Emma what she thought was causing the problems, she blamed external factors. She said the neighborhood was getting too competitive with new restaurants opening nearby. She claimed that food critics were being unfairly harsh because they wanted to see her fail after her early success. She said customers had unrealistic expectations because of all the media attention. People expect perfection every single time, she complained. They don't understand how hard it is to maintain that level of quality night after night. But when I pressed her for more details about what was actually happening in the restaurant, a different picture emerged. Emma admitted that she'd been spending less and less time in the kitchen because she was busy with other projects. She'd hired a head chef named Marcus to handle day-to-day cooking while she focused on what she called strategic initiatives, marketing, potential expansion, and building her personal brand. She'd also been traveling frequently for food festivals, media appearances, and consulting opportunities. "I thought you loved cooking," I said. "Why are you trying to get out of the kitchen?" "I do love cooking," Emma said defensively. "But I also love business, and I can't build an empire if I'm stuck cooking every single dish myself. I need to think bigger picture." "But isn't the cooking what made your restaurant successful in the first place? People came there because they wanted to experience your food." "The cooking was just the beginning," Emma said. "Now I need to leverage that success into something bigger. I'm working on a cookbook deal, and I've been talking to Food Network about developing my own show." I was alarmed by how disconnected Emma seemed from the actual operations of her restaurant. When I asked her specific questions about the menu or the kitchen staff, her answers were vague. It was clear that she was relying heavily on other people to run the day-to-day business. "Emma, have you eaten at your own restaurant recently?" I asked. There was a long pause. "Of course I have. I try to stop by when I can." "When was the last time you actually cooked a full service there?" Another pause. "I don't need to cook every night. That's why I hired Marcus. He's very talented." I realized that Emma had fundamentally misunderstood what had made her restaurant successful. It wasn't just good food. There were lots of restaurants in New York with good food. It was specifically Emma's food, her creativity, her hands-on approach, and her passion for cooking that had set the place apart. By removing herself from the kitchen, Emma had essentially turned her restaurant into just another place with a hired chef, except now it was trading on a reputation that was no longer being maintained. 2 months later, Emma called me in tears to tell me that her restaurant was closing. The combination of declining food quality, negative reviews, and Emma's absence from the kitchen had been too much to overcome. Customers had stopped coming, and the restaurant couldn't cover its operating costs anymore. Emma's investor, Richard, had tried to work with her for months to address the problems. He'd asked her to return to the kitchen full-time and focus on rebuilding the food quality. He'd offered to bring in a business manager to handle the administrative side so Emma could concentrate on cooking. But Emma had refused. She said she'd moved beyond being just a line cook and that going back to the kitchen full-time would be a step backward in her career. "I told Richard that I'm not just a chef anymore," Emma explained to me through her tears. "I'm a brand. I'm building something bigger than just one restaurant." Richard had finally given up and decided to cut his losses. Without his financial backing, the restaurant couldn't survive. Emma was devastated, but she was also angry. She blamed Richard for not understanding her vision, the critics for being too harsh, and the customers for not appreciating her creativity. "I was trying to build something bigger than just a restaurant," she said. "But nobody understood what I was trying to do. They wanted me to stay small and just cook forever." I felt terrible for Emma, but I was also frustrated. It seemed like she'd had an incredible opportunity and had let it slip away because she'd gotten distracted by fame and money. I tried to be supportive during our conversation, focusing on consoling Emma rather than criticizing her choices. She was clearly going through enough without me adding to her stress. After the restaurant closed, Emma moved back home with our parents temporarily. She said she needed time to figure out her next move and recover from the stress of the business failure. For a few weeks, Emma seemed genuinely reflective about what had gone wrong. She talked about maybe going back to working in other people's restaurants to rebuild her skills and reputation. She seemed to understand that she'd made some mistakes. But then Emma started talking about opening a new restaurant. She said she'd learned from her mistakes and knew how to do things differently this time. She'd been reading business books and talking to consultants about restaurant management. "I understand now that I need better systems," she said. "I need to be more hands-on with the operations while still building the brand." The problem was that Emma's credit was now ruined from the failed restaurant, and she had no money to invest in a new venture. She'd spent everything she'd earned from the first restaurant on her expensive lifestyle, and she owed money to various creditors from the business closure. Emma started reaching out to potential investors, but nobody was interested in backing someone whose first restaurant had failed so quickly and publicly. The restaurant industry is small, and word had gotten around about the circumstances of Emma's failure. That's when Emma came to me with a proposal that made my stomach drop. She asked if I would invest in her new restaurant concept. She needed about $200,000 to get started, and she thought that with my business background and her culinary skills, we could be partners in the venture. I know you believe in my talent, Emma said when she came over to my apartment to discuss the idea. And now I have the experience to know what not to do. This time will be different. I was torn. I did believe in Emma's talent as a chef, but I was concerned about her business judgment and priorities. The way her first restaurant had failed suggested that she hadn't learned the lessons I'd hoped she would. I told Emma I needed time to think about it, and that if I was going to invest that kind of money, I'd want to see a detailed business plan and have some input on the restaurant's operations. Emma seemed excited about the possibility and said she'd start working on a proposal for me. A few weeks later, Emma presented me with her business plan for the new restaurant. As I read through it, my concerns about her priorities were confirmed. The plan focused heavily on marketing, social media presence, and Emma's personal brand as a chef. There was relatively little detail about food costs, kitchen operations, or staff management, the fundamentals that actually make restaurants successful. Emma's concept involved her being the face of the restaurant while hiring other chefs to do most of the actual cooking. She wanted to focus on cookbook writing, TV appearances, and eventually franchising the concept to other cities. I want to build the Emma Parker brand into a national presence, she explained as we went through the business plan together. This restaurant would be the flagship, but the long-term vision is much bigger. When I pointed out that her first restaurant had failed precisely because she'd stopped focusing on the kitchen, Emma got defensive. That was different, she said. I was inexperienced then. I didn't understand how to delegate properly. Now I know how to hire the right people and manage them effectively. But Emma, customers come to restaurants for good food. If you're not cooking, how do you ensure the food quality stays high? I'll create systems and train the staff, she said. I can't be expected to cook every dish for the rest of my life. That's not scalable. I realized that Emma hadn't learned the lesson I thought she had from her restaurant failure. She was still more interested in being famous than in being a great chef. She still saw cooking as something she needed to move beyond rather than something she should master. The business plan read like it was written by someone who wanted to be a celebrity first and a chef second. There were detailed sections about media strategy and brand development, but very little about the actual food or restaurant operations. I made the difficult decision to decline her investment proposal. Emma, I don't think this business plan addresses the issues that caused your first restaurant to fail. Emma was shocked. What do you mean? I've thought through everything that went wrong. I think you're still more focused on building a brand than on cooking great food. The plan reads like you want to be a celebrity chef, not a restaurant owner. Emma got angry. You don't understand the restaurant industry. You have to think about marketing and brand building if you want to succeed long term. You can't just cook good food and hope people notice. But you have to cook good food consistently first, I said. And that means being in the kitchen, not just managing from a distance. Our conversation escalated quickly. Emma accused me of not believing in her vision and said I was being overly conservative because I didn't understand the creative industry. You've never taken any real risks, she said. You don't understand what it takes to build something creative and innovative. You just want me to stay small and safe. I tried to explain that I was concerned about her priorities, but Emma interpreted my feedback as personal criticism. I can't believe you're not going to help me, she said. After everything I've been through, I thought I could count on my sister to support me. I am supporting you, I said, but I don't think giving you money for this particular plan would actually help you succeed. So what am I supposed to do? Just give up on my dreams? No, but maybe consider working for someone else for a while to rebuild your reputation and skills before trying to open another restaurant. Emma looked at me like I'd slapped her. Work for someone else? I'm an award-winning chef. I'm not going backwards in my career. Emma, your restaurant failed. Working for established chefs isn't going backwards. It's being realistic about where you are right now. That's when Emma really exploded. She said I was jealous of her success and that I never understood what it took to be creative and entrepreneurial. She said I was trying to control her life because I'd paid for her culinary school. I never asked you to pay for school, she said, and I don't owe you the right to dictate my career choices because you did. I was stunned. I'm not trying to dictate anything. I'm just not comfortable investing in a plan that I think is likely to fail. Well, thanks for nothing, Emma said sarcastically. It's good to know I can count on family when times get tough. Emma left my apartment angry, and we didn't speak for several weeks after that conversation. I felt terrible about how things had gone, but I also felt like I'd made the right decision. Emma's business plan really did seem like it was focused on the wrong priorities. Update: 8 months later, ***. After our fight, Emma stopped talking to me entirely. When I'd reach out to our parents to check on her, they said she was working on some opportunities but was frustrated with me for not supporting her restaurant idea. I felt guilty about the situation, but I also felt like I'd made the right choice. Emma's business plan really did seem like it was focused on the wrong priorities, and I couldn't justify investing $200,000 in something I didn't believe would succeed. About a month after our fight, I heard through our mom that Emma had found another investor for her restaurant concept. Apparently, she'd connected with someone through social media who was interested in backing young entrepreneurs in the food industry. The investor was a man named David who owned several businesses and was looking to diversify into restaurants. He'd been impressed by Emma's previous media coverage and thought she had the right combination of talent and marketability to make a restaurant successful. I was worried about this development, but I figured maybe I'd been wrong about Emma's plan. Maybe she really had learned from her mistakes and would make the new restaurant work. Emma's second restaurant opened about 4 months later in a trendy neighborhood in Brooklyn. The concept was similar to what she'd proposed to me, modern American cuisine with Emma as the face of the brand, but with other chefs handling most of the day-to-day cooking. The opening got some media attention because of Emma's previous success and dramatic failure. Food bloggers were curious to see if she could make a comeback, and there was definitely interest in the restaurant from people who remembered her early acclaim. For the first few months, the restaurant seemed to be doing okay. It wasn't getting the rave reviews that Emma's first restaurant had received, but it was attracting customers and getting decent press coverage. But about 6 months after it opened, I started hearing through the culinary world grapevine that Emma's second restaurant was struggling with many of the same problems as the first one. Emma was rarely in the kitchen, delegating most of the cooking to her head chef while she focused on marketing and media appearances. The food quality was inconsistent, and reviews were starting to reflect that inconsistency. Instead of learning from the mistakes that had doomed her first restaurant, Emma seemed to be repeating them. She was still more interested in being a celebrity chef than in actually cooking, and she was still prioritizing her personal brand over the restaurant's operations. I heard from a friend who worked in the food industry that Emma had been spending more money on a publicist and social media marketing than on kitchen staff and ingredients. She was treating the restaurant as a platform for her personal brand rather than as a business that needed to serve good food consistently. The new investor, David, was apparently getting frustrated with Emma's approach. He had expected her to be more hands-on with the restaurant operations, but instead she was spending most of her time on promotional activities that weren't translating into better business results. Our parents were getting worried about Emma's situation, but they didn't know the full extent of her problems. Emma was still putting on a confident front with the family, posting about her restaurant on social media and talking about future plans. But people in the industry were starting to lose confidence in Emma's ability to run a successful restaurant. The pattern of initial promise followed by rapid decline was becoming her signature, and that's not a reputation you want in the competitive restaurant world. 2 months ago, Emma's second restaurant closed. This time, the failure was even more dramatic than the first one. The restaurant had been hemorrhaging money for months, and David finally decided to cut his losses. But the closure became messy when David discovered that Emma had been misrepresenting the restaurant's financial situation. She'd been providing him with inflated revenue numbers and understating the expenses, making the restaurant look more profitable than it actually was. David was furious about being misled, and he sued Emma for fraud and breach of contract. The lawsuit alleged that Emma had intentionally deceived him about her business experience and the restaurant's performance. The lawsuit became public when it was filed, and Emma's reputation in the culinary world was seriously damaged. Food industry publications wrote articles about her business failures, and other chefs started distancing themselves from her. The lawsuit revealed some embarrassing details about Emma's management of the restaurant. She'd been paying herself a significant salary while the restaurant was losing money. She'd spent thousands on personal expenses, clothing, travel, and entertainment that she'd charged to the business. Most damaging was the revelation that Emma had been claiming credit for dishes that were actually created by her head chef. The media coverage suggested that Emma had been more focused on taking credit than on actually contributing to the restaurant's success. Emma moved back in with our parents again, but this time she was in much worse financial shape. She owed money to creditors from both restaurants, and the lawsuit was costing her thousands in legal fees. Her reputation in the culinary world was essentially destroyed. Other chefs who had once respected her talent now saw her as someone who was more interested in fame than in cooking. Restaurant investors knew about her pattern of failures and weren't interested in working with her. That's when Emma called me. It was the first time we'd spoken since our fight 8 months earlier. "I need your help," she said, and I could tell she'd been crying. "I'm in serious financial trouble, and I don't know what to do." Over the next hour, Emma told me the full extent of her situation. She was about $150,000 in debt from the 2 failed restaurants. Her credit was completely destroyed, and she was facing the possibility of bankruptcy. The lawsuit with David was ongoing, and her lawyer said it could result in additional financial penalties if she lost. Emma was also dealing with harassment from some of the creditors she owed money to. I know we haven't been getting along, Emma said, but you're the only person I know who has the kind of money I need to get out of this mess. Emma asked me to lend her $150,000 to pay off her debts and give her a fresh start. She promised she'd get a regular job and pay me back over time. I'll take whatever job I can get, she said. I'll work as a line cook, prep cook, whatever. I just need to get out from under this debt so I can start over. I sat there listening to my sister, who I'd given $85,000 to just 4 years earlier, asking me for another $150,000 to fix the problems she created with her career choices. Emma, I said, what makes you think things would be different this time? Because I've learned my lesson, she said. I know I made mistakes with both restaurants, and I'm ready to be more practical about my career. You said you'd learned your lesson after the first restaurant failed. Then you made the same mistakes with the second one. This time is different, Emma insisted. I'm not talking about opening another restaurant. I just want to pay off my debts and get a normal job. I thought about everything that had happened over the past 4 years. I'd invested in Emma's education believing it would set her up for success. Instead, she'd used her culinary skills to chase fame and money and had ended up worse off than when she started. I'm not going to give you the money, I said. Emma was quiet for a long time. Then she said, why not? Because I don't think giving you money is going to solve the real problem. You've had 2 chances to build a successful career, and both times you made choices that prioritized fame over substance. Until you figure out why you keep making those choices, more money isn't going to help. Emma started crying again. So, you're just going to let me go bankrupt? You're going to let me lose everything. You already lost everything, I said. Twice. I'm not the one who made the choices that led to this situation. But you could help me fix it, Emma said. You have the money to make this all go away. And then what? You get out of debt, and in 5 years you're back in the same situation because you still haven't learned to make better choices? Emma got angry then. You act like you're so much smarter than me, but you've never taken any risks. You've never tried to build something creative. You just sit in your boring office job and judge people who actually have ambition. My boring office job is how I had $85,000 to pay for your education, I pointed out. And it's how I have money that you want me to use to bail you out now. I never asked you to pay for culinary school, Emma said. That was your choice. You're right, I said. It was my choice. And this is my choice too. Emma hung up on me, and we haven't spoken since. Update. 2 months later. The fallout from my decision not to help Emma has been intense and has basically torn our family apart. Our parents are furious with me, saying I'm abandoning my sister when she needs me most. She made mistakes, our mom said when she called to confront me about my decision. But that's what family is for. We help each other through difficult times. I did help her, I replied. I paid $85,000 for her education. She used that education to make choices that led to this situation. So, you're just going to let her suffer because you don't approve of her choices? Our dad asked during a particularly heated family dinner. She's your sister. She's struggling and you have the power to help her. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to punish Emma, but that I genuinely believed giving her money wouldn't solve her underlying problems. Emma has talent, I said, but she's more interested in being famous than in being good at her job. Until she figures that out, she's going to keep making the same mistakes. But our parents didn't want to hear that analysis. They said I was being judgmental and that I was letting money come between me and my sister. You've always been jealous of Emma's creativity, our mom said, which really hurt. You can't stand that she took risks and followed her dreams while you played it safe. I'm not jealous, I said. I'm concerned. Emma had incredible opportunities and she wasted them because she got distracted by fame and money. She's young, our dad said. Young people make mistakes. That doesn't mean we abandon them. The conversation went in circles. Our parents saw Emma's failures as youthful mistakes that the family should help her overcome. I saw them as a pattern of poor judgment that would likely continue unless Emma faced real consequences. Several other family members have weighed in as well, mostly taking Emma's side. My aunt called to tell me I was being selfish and cold. My cousin posted on Facebook about the importance of supporting family members during difficult times, which felt like a passive-aggressive attack on my decision. Emma has always been the creative one in the family, my aunt said. She took risks to follow her passion, and now she needs our support. You have the money to help her, and you're choosing not to. That's just cruel. The family drama has been exhausting. Every family gathering becomes an opportunity for people to pressure me to change my mind about helping Emma. Some relatives have stopped inviting me to events because they don't want the conflict. Meanwhile, I heard through our mom that Emma filed for bankruptcy last month. She's moved back in with our parents permanently and is working part-time at a chain restaurant while trying to figure out her next steps. The bankruptcy process has been humiliating for Emma. All of her financial mistakes have become public record, and the local food community knows about her situation. She's had to liquidate her remaining possessions to pay creditors, including selling the expensive kitchen equipment she'd accumulated during her successful period. Emma is apparently struggling with depression and has started seeing a therapist. Our mom says she barely leaves the house except to go to work, and she stopped posting on social media entirely. I feel terrible about how everything has turned out. I genuinely wanted Emma to succeed when I paid for her culinary school. I thought I was giving her the tools she needed to build a great career. Instead, Emma used those tools to chase fame and money, and when that didn't work out, she expected me to bail her out from the consequences. Now our entire family is divided, Emma is struggling financially and emotionally, and I'm questioning whether I made the right choice. Part of me wonders if I should have just given Emma the money. $150,000 would have been a significant financial hit for me, but it wouldn't have ruined my life the way this debt is ruining hers. Maybe I could have helped her get back on her feet, and maybe she really would have learned from her mistakes this time. But the bigger part of me still believes that giving Emma money would just enable her to avoid learning from her mistakes. She's never had to face real consequences for her poor choices because someone, our parents, investors, or me, was always there to cushion the fall. Maybe bankruptcy and working at a chain restaurant will force Emma to develop a better relationship with food and cooking. Maybe she'll remember why she loved cooking in the first place and focus on getting good at it instead of getting famous for it. Or maybe I'm wrong, and I've just abandoned my sister when she needed me most. Maybe the lesson I'm trying to teach her isn't worth the damage it's doing to our family relationships. I know our family thinks I'm being heartless, but I honestly believe that giving Emma money would just enable her to avoid learning from her mistakes. She's never had to develop real resilience or face the consequences of her choices. The $85,000 I spent on her education was supposed to be an investment in her future. Instead, it became the foundation for a series of increasingly poor decisions that ultimately left her worse off than when she started. Emma is talented enough to build a successful career if she wants to. But she has to want success more than she wants fame, and she has to be willing to work for it instead of expecting other people to fund her dreams. The hardest part is that I can't stop second-guessing myself. When I see how much Emma is struggling, when I hear about her depression and financial stress, when I see how angry our parents are with me, I wonder if I'm being cruel rather than helpful. But then I remember the pattern of choices Emma made, abandoning the kitchen for media appearances, misrepresenting her restaurant's finances, prioritizing her personal brand over food quality, and I think that those problems won't be solved by giving her money. Until Emma learns to value substance over fame, until she develops genuine business skills and emotional maturity, no amount of money from me is going to help her build a sustainable career. I've learned that you can give someone opportunities, but you can't make them use those opportunities wisely. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices, even when it's painful to watch and even when it makes you the villain in your family story. Emma has the talent and training to succeed in the culinary world. But she has to want to succeed for the right reasons, and she has to be willing to do the hard work of building a career based on skill rather than celebrity. Maybe she'll figure that out while working at a chain restaurant and dealing with bankruptcy. Maybe she'll remember what she loved about cooking before she got distracted by fame. Maybe this will be the wake-up call that finally teaches her to make better choices. Or maybe I've made a terrible mistake, and my sister's life will never recover from this low point. Maybe our relationship is permanently damaged, and maybe our family will never forgive me for refusing to help when I had the power to do so. I don't know which outcome is more likely, but I do know that I can't keep enabling Emma's poor choices just because watching her fail is painful. Sometimes love means letting go, even when everyone around you thinks you're being heartless.